Her biggest mistake in life was her decision to date the wrong person. Instead of having social media take up all her time, she instead substituted it with a brand new habit. And this influencer decided that he'll practically do almost anything to make money. Let's find out how these decisions turned out, starting with number 6, gang-related. Dajahn Jeezy Mula McBean, leader of the Brooklyn-based Real Ryte gang, is now serving over 12 years in federal prison, along with 2 of his crew members, after a gang conflict led to an innocent bystander getting caught in the crossfire. McBean, along with Mark Telly Waiters and Samaj Bam Bam Smith, tried to exact revenge on their bread gang rivals, but their plan was a total disaster, with a car chase that ended with a random person getting popped and all 3 gang members getting tossed in prison for over a decade. Between 2015 and 2018, Real Ryte and Bread Gang were locked in a years-long feud, leading to multiple confrontations. The tipping point came when Real Ryte member Sean Pert was taken out, allegedly by Bread Gang. As you'd expect, Real Ryte had been looking for payback, so when McBean, Smith, and Waiters came across a Bread Gang member in Manhattan, they saw an opportunity. The trio sped after the guy, going the wrong way down a one-way street, turning the situation into complete chaos. As they wildly pursued their rival, someone opened fire, but instead of hitting the intended target, they struck an innocent bystander who had nothing to do with anything. Luckily, the bystander survived while their target escaped. Investigators eventually tied McBean and his crew to the incident as part of a larger racketeering case, leading to a guilty plea on conspiracy charges and a 12-year prison sentence. Meanwhile, Waiters received over 12 years, and Smith was sentenced to 11 years for his contributions to the catastrophe. But even from behind bars, McBean wasn't about to learn any lessons about anything, apparently. Learning life lessons just isn't one of his strong suits. Bad decisions, however, are. While in prison, McBean allegedly set up an ambush on a rival over a social media dispute. It seems like all social media is good for these days is fueling drama, so this isn't exactly surprising. McBean had arranged for a couple of associates to lure the rival to a nightclub, intending to have him taken out. The first attempt failed when the rival managed to escape unharmed. Surprise, surprise, they missed again. But you don't get massive prison sentences slapped on you for being some kind of quitter, so McBean had his associates try again a couple of days later. This time, the target was sitting in a parked car with his girlfriend, 28-year-old Clarissa Burgos, when they approached. The rival once again survived, but Burgos, an innocent bystander whose crime was having the wrong boyfriend, tragically lost her life. The failed attempt left McBean, along with accomplices Carl Pacaval Smith and Chelsea Ms. Chin Harris, facing serious conspiracy charges. With video evidence of the incident, prosecutors say the case is solid. If convicted, the 3 could face life in prison or possibly the ultimate punishment. As of the release of this video, all 3 are awaiting trial. The Real Ryte crew didn't just dabble in botch jobs, they also had a side hustle and fraud, but their most lucrative operation seems to have been making catastrophically bad choices. Between botched attempts, reckless chases, and a complete disregard for collateral damage, it seems like if you're dealing with Real Ryte, the safest place to be is their intended targets. For McBean and his crew, every botched move they made only dug them deeper into a legal pit they'll hopefully never climb out of. At this point, it's hard to say who's still running the gang on the outside because most of them seem to have made the kind of choices that come with a permanent prison address. Number 5. Immediate regret. Willie Murphy from Rochester, New York, was just getting ready for bed when a stranger decided to make a terrible life choice, breaking into her house. The 82-year-old heard pounding on her door, with the man outside begging for help. She called the police, but wasn't about to let a random stranger waltz in. That's when he got angry. And then, stupid, before Murphy knew it, her door was busted open, and she had an uninvited guest. But the intruder was missing a critical piece of information. Willie Murphy isn't your average grandma. She's an award-winning bodybuilder who spends her free time lifting weights at the YMCA. In other words, this guy had just walked into a real-life action movie starring an 82-year-old powerhouse. Since it was dark, Murphy managed to hide as the suspect stumbled through her house. Then she struck. Literally, she grabbed the table and beat him with it until it broke. Because if you can defend yourself with a table, you should. But she wasn't done. While he was on the ground, she jumped on him, making sure he stayed there. Then she grabbed a bottle of shampoo and emptied it right into his face for good measure, which had to be hilarious to see. But that still wasn't enough to satisfy Murphy. When the guy continued struggling, she picked up a broom and continued to go to work on him like she was disciplining him. By the time the police arrived, Murphy had the situation well under control. The suspect was sent to the hospital, while Murphy got a standing ovation from first responders, who even asked to take selfies with her. The next day, she was back at the gym, deadlifting 225 pounds like nothing had happened. If this guy thought he was messing with a helpless old woman, he learned the hard way. He picked the absolute wrong house. You know her grandkids don't act up when they come to visit. And by the way, don't forget to click that subscribe button and make sure you also click the bell to turn on all notifications so you don't miss any critical knowledge to defend yourself. Number 4, the accidental confession. Vanessa Guerra from Mankato, Minnesota might have pulled off the most unnecessary confession in history. The 30-year-old delivery driver was caught for auto theft after writing about it in her diary like a teenager journaling about a crush. According to police, Guerra documented her crime on the same day a 2004 Ford Freestar van went missing and ended up at a salvage yard. Her diary entry? Totally stole a car today. Something I never thought of doing, which is something most of us have never thought of doing, followed by some mild panic about the whole situation. Unsurprisingly, that didn't make for a great legal defense. Since police were already searching for the stolen van, they began checking local salvage yards, where they quickly found it. Scrapyard employees had records of the sale and immediately identified Guerra as the one who brought it in. When confronted, she denied knowing it was stolen. But somehow, during the investigation, they got a hold of her diary, which clearly said otherwise. She probably had some crudely written note on the front that said, "Vanessa's diary, do not read, private," or something. And she thought the cops would respect that. To make matters worse, Guerra already had a history of driving-related offenses, including driving with a suspended license and without insurance. As of the release of this video, she's facing charges for theft and receiving stolen property. Writing in a diary is great for self-reflection, but here's a suggestion. Maybe don't use it as a written confession for a crime committed. Number 3, replacement activity. Madeline Scott, a financial planner from Mount Martha, Australia, had a social media problem. So she quit cold turkey. But instead of finding a healthier obsession, she went all in on illegal substances, both using and selling. And that's how a simple traffic stop turned into a major bust. At 4 a.m., police pulled Scott over for a poorly executed U-turn. When they spotted an ice pipe sticking out of her pink handbag, they decided to search her car. That's when they hit the jackpot, finding 3 kilos of the type of substance often used by people who want their intended targets to not remember anything. They also found another illegal substance, the type from the show Breaking Bad, stacks of cash, Ziploc bags, a scale, and a tick book for keeping track of her sales. Scott was pretty well busted after police found the loads of illegal substances and cash in her car. But she made things worse by grabbing her phone and frantically trying to delete messages while officers were still searching. Before she could erase anything, an officer intervened, stopping her and taking her into custody. Scott later admitted to selling to clients in person and online for about 6 weeks. According to her, it wasn't about making money, it was just about keeping her own supply going. She justified the massive amount of predatory nightclub substance by saying it was easier to buy in bulk than to keep running back and forth for more. And as for why she even got into this lifestyle in the first place, she said it all started when she tried to break her Instagram problem, which is some real backwards logic. Scott ultimately pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 18 months in prison. She expressed remorse in court, acknowledging the consequences of her actions. While she had no prior convictions and showed efforts toward rehabilitation, the severity of the offense still led to a prison sentence. Getting caught up in using is one thing, But selling a substance known for its dangerous and predatory use is another. This isn't just self-destruction or a reckless excuse. It's enabling harm to others, including those who never had a choice. Who knows how many victims she created? Yet, that part gets overlooked. Ultimately, using illegal substances is never the answer, no matter how much Instagram makes you want to. Number 2. One last effort. Anthony Sanchez from Colorado led law enforcement on a chaotic and ultimately life-ending pursuit that escalated in an unexpected way. After causing multiple crashes and nearly hitting other vehicles, Sanchez was finally stopped by officers who found a firearm in his car. So he was taken into custody, handcuffed behind his back, and placed in a state trooper's cruiser. But what should have been a simple arrest ended up turning into something else entirely. Surveillance footage from inside the cruiser showed Sanchez pulling off a fairly impressive escape act. He managed to wriggle his hands to the front of his body, climb into the front seat, and take off with the police car. Officers standing nearby could only watch as their own vehicle sped away. Now driven by the very suspect they had just arrested. What followed was a 21-minute, 37-mile high-speed chase that reached speeds over 100 miles per hour. Troopers deployed stop sticks, which successfully punctured the car's tires. But instead of coming to a safe stop, Sanchez lost control and slammed into a parked semi-truck. The impact left the stolen police car mangled, and Sanchez was still alive when officers rushed to free him. Sanchez was then immediately transported to the hospital, but his injuries ultimately proved to be too much to overcome for him. The driver of the semi was unhurt, but the whole incident left law enforcement scrambling to figure out how a handcuffed suspect managed to steal their vehicle in the first place. Colorado State Patrol's chief acknowledged that while rare, suspects escaping their cuffs and getting into the driver's seat isn't unheard of. As for Sanchez, it's unclear what his endgame was, but stealing a police car while handcuffed in front of officers was never going to work out. Whatever he was thinking, that bad decision led to the chase that ended in a way no one wanted. And thankfully, no one else was hurt. Number 1. Live streams for cash. Influencer Mike Smalls Jr. from Tampa, Florida, decided that braving a hurricane on an air mattress for a $70,000 survival challenge would be a good way to rack up views and maybe some cash. To sell the bit, he set up an entire scene by a flooded river with an umbrella, an air mattress, and a pack of ramen noodles, as if he were settling in for a relaxing afternoon. His goal was to hit 100,000 live viewers on Kick, a live streaming platform similar to Twitch. He promised to jump into the floodwaters while floating on his air mattress if he reached that milestone. But before he even got there, he threw himself in anyway. What could go wrong with a stunt like this? Well, apparently a lot. And it did. Smalls had already pulled a similar stunt during Hurricane Helene, so he figured he had this all planned out. He even called it a calculated banger. Confident in his setup, he launched himself onto the floodwaters atop his air mattress. Unsurprisingly, the current immediately started pulling him downstream. With no way to steer and the wind picking up, he quickly lost control. Panicking, he abandoned his so-called raft, jumping into the water, grabbing onto a tree to stop himself from being swept away. But that's when the real problem became apparent. Smalls didn't know how to swim. Thankfully, he managed to pull himself out of the water. Despite warnings from emergency officials and viewers calling him reckless, Smalls insisted that he was in control. Even as he battled the elements, getting knocked down by gale-force winds, he kept streaming. He later admitted that maybe it was a little dangerous, but still defended his actions, claiming it was all part of being a content creator. After all, he said people like to see kind of edgy things, though this seems less edgy and more dumb. The Hurricane Survival Challenge, which promised $70,000 to the streamer who could last the longest broadcasting live during the storm, didn't go in his favor. Another participant ultimately took the prize. Despite that, Smalls still managed to profit from his idiotic stunt, earning enough from his stream to cover a few bills. And when asked if he'd do something like this again, he made it clear that for the right payout, he'd be back. He's a principled man like that. Ultimately, Smalls walked away from the storm in one piece, but it wasn't because of his so-called planning or his being in control. He was lucky. Hurling yourself into a river during a hurricane for a social media challenge is pretty stupid. But doing it when you don't even know how to swim? That's up there with not reading the entire terms of service agreement for Disney+. And we totally read that, right? Click to watch one of these next videos.